Hey everybody, my name is Trevor Lane, senior writer for LakersNation.com, and this is the Lakers Nation newsfeed, your home for breaking Lakers news. Today we're talking about Warriors head coach Steve Kerr and some misguided comments that he made about Lakers star Anthony Davis. You guys are going to want to stick around for this. First, quick shout out to our sponsors, Uptime Energy Drinks, how energy should feel. You can find them at 7-Eleven, GNC, and Amazon.com. And of course, betonline.ag, your home for online gambling. All you have to do is head over to clnsmedia.com/LeBron. That's how they know that you came from us. Then punch in the promo code CLNS50 to get a 50% bonus on your first deposit. Okay, so the Lakers have put together quite a team around LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and Steve Kerr is not too thrilled about it. No, Kerr isn't upset that the Lakers suddenly look like they've got a good team, but he's upset with how the Anthony Davis trade situation unfolded. This is what he had to say on the Warriors Insider podcast. He said, "I'm talking more about the Anthony Davis situation, where a guy is perfectly healthy and has a couple years left on his deal and says, I want to leave. That's a real problem that the league has to address and that the players have to be careful with. When you sign on that dotted line, you owe your effort and your play to that team, the city, the fans. And then once the contract runs out, it's completely your right to leave as a free agent. But if you sign the contract, then you should be bound to that contract." No, Steve, you are completely off in this situation. Look, Anthony Davis is not the guy to be firing at here because that is not what Anthony Davis did at all. In fact, I've been saying this for a while now. Pelicans fans who are upset with Anthony Davis have no right to be. If anything, they should be thanking Anthony Davis for what he did. Here's what happened. Anthony Davis went to the Pelicans and said, hey, look, I'm going to be a free agent in 2020. I'm giving you guys a heads up. I'm not staying. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm not going to sign an extension with you. He let them know ahead of time. That way the Pelicans could get value for him. They weren't left high and dry. Look, in the NBA, the worst thing that can happen to a team is not a superstar requesting a trade or telling a team, giving them a heads up that they're going to leave in free agency. The worst thing is the superstar saying nothing and then leaving in free agency, because you know what? When that happens, the team gets zero. They get some cap room, and that's it. Okay, if your team's over the cap, then it doesn't really matter all that much. Look, the Toronto Raptors lost Kawhi Leonard, and they weren't able to replace him. There was nothing they could do. They just lose a superstar player. Now, look, would they make that trade-off? Sure, they would keep him anyway, win an NBA title, totally worth it. But most teams are not in that situation. Okay, for most teams, losing a star in free agency is incredibly damaging, and the Lakers went through it. They lost Dwight Howard to free agency back when Dwight Howard could, still play basketball. But when that happened, the Lakers just lost a star player and got nothing in return. Look what the Pelicans got for Anthony Davis because he went to them and because he told them in advance, hey, I'm leaving. Go ahead and try to trade me. Okay, and they did, and they get Lonzo Ball, they get Brandon Ingram, they get Josh Hart, they get a bunch of picks, they get all of these things. Okay, all because Davis was forthright with them and told them ahead of time he won't stay. Now look, some Pelicans fans are mad at Anthony Davis because he limited the market, right? He limited the market. He said, I will only go to these teams. He had a handful of teams that he would go to. But what's he supposed to say in that situation? Right? The Boston Celtics are going to call him up. They're going to make it known that, hey, we would like to trade for you, but will you stay with us in free agency? What's he supposed to say? Say, yes, I will stay with every team so the Pelicans can get the most possible, and then leave them? Is he supposed to lie and not tell them, hey, I don't really want to play in Boston. I would rather go somewhere else? Look, I can't fault star players for saying, hey, I've got a list of teams that I'm willing to stay with, because teams around the league are going to want to know, before we give up a ton for you, would you be willing to stay here? And if that answer is no, then they probably shouldn't be willing to give up a ton. Some teams might. Some teams still do it. Oklahoma City went after Paul George, even though he hadn't planned on staying there. And then, well, I guess we kind of see how that all turned out. But look, Anthony Davis, if anything, helped the Pelicans out. And yet Steve Kerr here is firing shots at him and this whole situation, saying it's this issue that the league has to address. No, Steve, here's what needs to be addressed. The fact that it was public. That was the problem. That's what got messy, and that's where people got hurt. That's where people look bad. That's where Anthony Davis's reputation gets dragged through the mud. That's where the Pelicans organization has to deal with these constant questions. That's where young players like Lonzo and BI and Josh Hart and Kyle Kuzma and all these guys have to deal with trade rumors on a daily basis. That's the issue, right? Is when this becomes public. And why did it become public? Well, because the Pelicans tried to go around Rich Paul, tried to not talk to the agent and tried to go straight to the player, which is a no-no. Okay, that's why this thing was made public. Normally, you try to keep these things very, very private. So maybe the NBA tweaks things a little bit somehow to try to keep trade requests private. But if anything, Anthony Davis saved the Pelicans by going to them and telling them ahead of time that he was going to leave. And in fact, if you are going to take issue with anyone right now about this situation, about players wanting out of their contracts, it's Paul George. He still has 3 years under contract. His final year's a player option, but still 3 years under contract. He just re-signed with the Oklahoma City Thunder a year ago and said, hey, I'm going to be with this team. I'm committed. I'm staying with you guys. I'm ready to go, which was not what Anthony Davis told the Pelicans, right? And then a year later, Kawhi Leonard comes along and Paul George says, hey, look, the grass looks greener over there. Trade me and only trade me to this team. That's another issue, where you still have years under contract. But you know what? Even in that situation, Oklahoma City had him for 3 years. They could have told him, sorry, not going to do it. You're under contract. You need to play basketball for us, right? Now, they didn't because the Clippers gave up a ton, right? Arguably, the Clippers gave up more for Paul George than the Lakers gave up for Anthony Davis. So did the Oklahoma City Thunder become damaged because they had to trade Paul George? Maybe a little bit. They didn't want to trade him, but look what they got. Look what they got in return. Isn't that better than Paul George being unhappy for the next 2 years, opting out of the final year of his player option, and then leaving for nothing? I sure think the Oklahoma City Thunder are in a better situation, at least because Paul George spoke up, said, hey, I'm unhappy. Let's try to figure out something that works here. Again, it's far worse to lose somebody in free agency. Look, Kerr just went through this. He lost Kevin Durant in free agency, and his team was lucky. The Warriors were fortunate that the Nets were in a position where they were able to sign and trade D'Angelo Russell to the Warriors so they could maintain some talent. But if that hadn't been the case, what if Durant had gone to the Knicks? Then what? The Warriors are just left high and dry. They'd lose him for nothing. And then Kerr maybe would have a better understanding of what really went down here and how damaging it really can be if somebody just takes off in free agency. Maybe that's something he's going to have to deal with next summer when Draymond Green becomes a free agent. But again, bottom line, he's taking shots at the wrong guy. He's taking shots at somebody that actively tried to help the team that he's on. Guys don't have to stay with their teams. That's what free agency is all about. Players earn that right. They earn the right to go somewhere else when they want. Okay, when their contract is up. And if you give your team a heads up in advance, then hey, that looks even better for you. That's a pretty strong sign of respect. Heck, and I'm not just saying this because I cover the team that got Anthony Davis. I hope if Anthony Davis has plans to leave in 2020 when he's a free agent, I sure hope that at the trade deadline, he lets the Lakers know. I would gladly prefer that. In fact, I would praise Anthony Davis if he lets the Lakers know that in advance so they can get something for him. Dwight Howard sure didn't, and he walked away for nothing. The Lakers didn't get anything in that scenario. Okay, that is the greater of the two evils. Yes, it's always messy. Yes, it sucks to have somebody tell you, look, I don't want to be there. I don't want to be with this franchise. But you know what? Your team is in much better shape if you know that going in rather than finding out on July 1st or July 2nd or whatever that, hey, guess what? Your guy is now gone. That's a devastating situation. Now, look, the league is going to take a look at free agency. They're going to take a look at tampering. They're going to take a look at everything that's been going on this summer. They're going to take a look at why some teams already had players pretty much locked up, even though free agency hadn't started. That's a bigger issue for them to look at than what's going on here, than players asking for trades, okay? Especially if the catalyst is the Anthony Davis situation. I can see if a guy's got three years left under contract and then he's asking for a trade right away. Okay, maybe that's an issue. Maybe you want to try to come up with something there, even though I don't think you really can. Okay, maybe you'd come up with something to try to keep it private. That would certainly solve a lot of the issues on my end. But from what Kerr is saying, and this is another quote for him, he said, it's a little disturbing that there have been some action that happens before contracts are up where teams are sort of held hostage and the league is sort of held hostage. I'm not a big fan of that. That's damaging for everybody. Teams still have the choice. They're not held hostage at all. Look, if Kawhi Leonard had told the Raptors at the trade deadline, hey, look, guys, I'm not going to re-sign, I'm going to leave, they would still have the choice. They don't have to trade him. They can keep him, and they can just let him play out the rest of his contract and take their shot in the playoffs with him, knowing that that would be it, that was going to be the end of it. They still have that choice. The Pelicans could have done the same thing with Davis. They could have said, all right, AD, well, you know what? We just don't really want to trade you. You're going to play out the final year here, and he would have done that. And then you'll have to go somewhere else in free agency. It just doesn't make sense for a franchise to do that, okay? Because then they're just hurting themselves. So again, Steve Kerr, look, I get that it was messy, and maybe that part wasn't pleasant, but the player that he's aiming at here is not the right one. Anthony Davis wasn't in the wrong in this situation for what he did with the Pelicans. And again, you know what? Most teams would be so lucky that if their star is planning on leaving, they would let them know in advance so that team could recoup some of those losses and get something back. All right, guys, make sure you head over to LakersNation.com for more on this story and everything else going on in the world of the Los Angeles Lakers. Head over to the Lakers Nation YouTube channel and make sure you give us a shout out on there and follow us on social media at Lakers Nation on Twitter and Facebook, at Lakers Nation Official on Instagram. Don't forget to support Uptime Energy Drinks. You can find them on 7-Eleven, GNC, and Amazon.com. And head over to CLNSmedia.com/LeBron for some amazing online gambling, and then use that promo code CLNS50. My name's Trevor Lane. You can follow me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane. Till next time, see ya.